the February 1st date for Canada and Mexico still holds.
That's White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt responding to a question yesterday seeking verification if President Donald Trump still plans to impose a 25% tariff on all goods from Canada and Mexico. Tonight, new trade war tactics, including a Buy Local Canadian initiative. From Montreal, this is episode 18 of Night Talk. I'm Gary MacDonald.
And from Tulum, Mexico, I'm Eddie Takalik.
And Eddie, what's the weather like in Mexico today?
I'll tell you what, I looked out my friend's window through the marvels of Messenger, and a hell of a lot better than what you got there. It was about 80, it was about 30 degrees here. Beautiful sunny day. Really can't complain. And then my good friend Larry took the phone, turned it out to the window, and oh my God, minus 22 in snow, Gary. Poor you.
Yep.
I feel bad.
Well, I've been inside all day ever since
Yeah.
my little episode the other day, and I do apologize to everyone for wearing the mask, but believe me, tonight you're better off with the mask on. Hopefully within the next week or so we can get rid of it along the way. Yeah, it was a bit of an episode the other day. I had an up close and personal encounter with a utility cover on a sidewalk here in the city, so it's not pretty. Anyway, we've got that out of the way. Certainly not trying to hide my face, my identity, or anything like that. I mean, there's enough of it out there on the web now, so that's the way it goes. All right. Also, a reminder, we want you to take part. Let us know your thoughts by posting a comment, and we will feature and respond to as many comments as possible during the show. Well, Eddie, the clock is ticking down to Saturday when President Trump says he will impose the tariffs. Trump first used the tariffs to push Canada to tighten up our border to cut off the flow of illegal migrants and fentanyl. He has also mentioned meeting our defense spending commitments to NATO. Well, he is also suggesting, are you ready for this? We are selling more than we are buying. He says the U.S. is subsidizing Canada's economy. The federal government has now rolled out new border measures. Ottawa is also preparing a list of counter tariffs and taxes that could include energy and rare metals that the U.S. needs. Now, meantime, the federal government is also reported to be preparing a financial aid package for businesses and workers affected by the tariffs. That aid package would be similar to payments rolled out during the COVID pandemic. Well, certainly all of this talk, and as it has been with Donald Trump over the last couple of months after the November election win, things keep changing. Today, his Commerce Secretary, during his hearings, confirmation hearings, suggested that the tariffs may come in two layers. The first one hitting on Saturday, and if we get the border tightened up to their satisfaction, which I thought we already had with the deal that they rolled out about a month ago, then we would move on to the next thing. And there's still an April 1st deadline that's hanging out there in the distance, which was mentioned prior to Trump's inauguration, or maybe on the day of his inauguration. And that was supposedly the date for a study to be completed on the overall impact of our trade. Like it just keeps rolling and changing, every time you turn around. You've been in on a ship full of mainly Americans, and then you spent some time in Florida. Are you getting the sense that they really understand what's going on here?
I would kind of favor to say no on that side of the line. This was either through observation or group conversation or overhearing conversations on the cruise. I also had the opportunity to spend some time in Central Florida, in Winter Haven and in Okeechobee. And I also had an opportunity to actually speak to close friends of ours who the husband just happens to be a Trump supporter, and it was a pretty good conversation I had with him. But at the end of that, Gary, it's almost like there is always a reason as to why he's doing things. There is a justification in people's minds as to what he's doing is good for the country. And when you ask a very simple question like, well, okay, how does this improve the lives of the regular Joe? How does this improve the life of the commoner? And they'll say, oh, the economy, the stocks are going to be great, and then you kind of throw an argument out and say, well, do you think a person who's trying to feed a family of two or three is actually going to be happy that the stock market is climbing? Not at all. So this is an irrelevant comment that you're making for the good of America in general. So it was a good conversation back and forth that way, and I was starting to find out that I think it's more along the lines of generational commitment and generational um, sticking with a political divide. Either you're a Republican and your family has always been Republican, or you're a Democrat and your family's always voted for the Democrats. And I was starting to feel out that the conversations that I've been in and the ones that I participated in, regardless of who is leading the Republican Party, they're going to vote Republican. Um, and unfortunately, in the situation now that the world faces with Trump in control of the United States of America, the so-called representing freedom of the world and democracy, I'm not sure that over a couple of months or over a year or so that a lot of these individuals that typically vote Republican and maybe in the swing states weren't sure whether they should vote Republican, but they did because the husband or the wife or the father or grandfather did so. Very quickly, I think they might take a look at themselves in the mirror and say, "Oh my God, what have we done?" But my feeling is it's along party lines more than anything else. And I don't know, Gary, is Donald Trump somebody that everybody would raise their hands and say he's the best thing since sliced cheese? No, neither was Biden, and neither was his predecessors before that, down to the Bushes. They do the best they can for the best of the people. You would like to think, but the way I'm getting the remarks and responses are all in defense of Donald Trump. Oh, that's just Donald. You have to get used to him. I don't know. That's a pretty dangerous statement to make in the way he's already conducted business, and in some of the controversy that's already come out, and he's barely been inaugurated for a week, and all these controversies are coming out based on some of his decisions and his supporters. So, pretty. I was glad to get out of Florida, to tell you the truth. That's the first time I've actually said that.
Wow. It's, you mentioned the word democracy in your comment, and I'm beginning to think, watching some of the executive orders and listening to some of his cabinet nominees, I think that there's a bit of chipping away at democracy, the word democracy, and the meaning of democracy. I'm beginning to, when I'm hearing things like Elon Musk 2 weeks ago on stage, with this heartfelt salute, and then talking about the election saving the state of civilization, as I mentioned last week, I find some of that rhetoric extremely troubling. And I find the fact that even some of the executive orders, as soon as he signed them, were being challenged in court, and legal precedent leaning on the side of he didn't have the authority, even as president, to sign off on these executive orders, doing whatever they were at the time, doing what he was doing. And he's already started to backtrack on some things. And I heard somebody talking about him today, where he likes to go in, and if he's got a weak opponent, somebody on the ropes, and that's who he goes looking for, and beats them up a bit, and then finally gets at least one thing that he's looking for, and he has a win, he moves on. He grows tired of it, and he moves on. Well, there are a couple of things that he's backtracked on in the last day or two, about the federal aid, cutting off all federal aid. That has been reversed. and I don't know, I didn't see the full story on it, so I'm not sure if Trump himself reversed it, or if it was court that reversed it, or it was heading to court, and Trump decided, okay, I don't need that. It's not that big of a win, so I'll reverse it, or I can. No matter what he does, even when he loses, he still claims victory somehow.
Yeah.
So, but he's not. Like there's no thought. He's saying, oh well, U.S. citizens have been subsidizing Canada and our economy for a long time, and that's what he's. That's the lead of the cavalry for him on that side of the border. But the fact of it is that's not necessarily the case at all. As a matter of fact, if you take the energy sales last year out of the equation, the balance of trade was on our side in favor of the U.S. So, and the energy side of it was only because of the fluctuation of oil prices on the world markets. So,
and also that because of the extremely reduced rates and prices that Canada is selling oil and hydro to the United States, that's creating this deficit in terms of dollars and cents for surplus, right? So there's a lot here that he's not taking into account, and of course, in terms of misinforming the public and misinforming the regular United States viewer who watches Fox News and whatever else, he's never going to come out and say that because it doesn't work to his favor. And Donald does things that will work to his favor, and if he doesn't see that it's working for him right off the bat, he'll chuck it, just like you said, and move on to something else. But inevitably, he'll circle back with some other tactic to get what he wants. I mean, that's the way he's lived his entire life. Why would we expect him to change that during his presidency? We saw during the Trump 1.0, and now we're seeing it with a vengeance with Trump 2.0, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, in all of this, stepping away from the looming economic storm that is coming our way, I saw an article the other day, and it was like, where is our official head of state? Our official head of state has been silent, and I thought about that for a minute.
You're speaking about England now, right?
Yeah, the king. Of course,
the king.
Yeah. Of course, the king is apolitical, so does not get involved in this sort of stuff, which leads me to another conversation I want to have on the show in the not too distant future when this stuff dies down a bit, and that is, folks, we've got to give a long, hard pause and thought to maintaining our connection with the monarchy.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous. And we are a sovereign nation, and that sovereignty is right now under attack, really, because every time Trump opens his mouth about the 51st state and Governor Trudeau, or that is an attack on Canadians and our sovereignty. And who the hell does he think he is? What does he think he's doing? All he's going to do is get our asses up in the air even more so, and he's going to have trouble. And we'll get into a little bit about how it's the anti-Trump American blowback is beginning in this country. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but I want to come back a bit to the aid package that's been formulated, very similar to the pandemic packages. The one thing is, I keep hearing, industry, businesses, workers, but there's so far out of that, I haven't heard anything about anyone that is not in the workforce at the moment, or has retired, or again is unable to be in the workforce, or is not employable in some form. There's no talk about them, and yet those people, a lot of them, most are on fixed incomes, and as the tariffs take hold, even like a 5 or 10% tariff is still going to be devastating on prices, and for people like that on fixed incomes, because the price of things, like just even in the last 2 weeks, I was in a store the other day, and I was looking at my favorite tub of Haagen-Dazs ice cream, the tall one, that used to be $9.99. It's up to $10.49 now. Like
Wow.
a buck
And you know
50.
what? While we were in the United States, Gary, I'm not kidding you. A dozen eggs was $12.50 US. $12.50 US for medium grade for a medium sized egg. I couldn't believe it, and the prices are just keep on climbing. And that's what I said when you asked me about what I've heard while I've been on the cruise ship and in Florida. How is the little guy, and we're talking about the little guy in terms of funding from the Canadian government, how is the little guy going to be able to get to never mind the next year, get through this year, the way things are starting to turn out. If we're gonna, if we, along with other countries, which some of our liberal wannabes are professing, they're looking at creating a consortium, Canada amongst other countries, to band together and call it Team World, if you want to call it anything, more than Team Canada, Team World, to see what they're going to do against Mr. Trump and the United States in terms of retaliatory measures to the tariffs he's threatening on imposing to everybody around the world. Countries that have been side by side in difficult times through wars and whatever else. I mean, just turning around and biting everyone, and he's going to impose tariffs on everybody. So, what happens when the rest of the world fights back? What's going to happen to that poor guy who right now is looking at a dozen eggs for $12.50, and all of a sudden he's going to have to pay $14? What about the pumps? I mean, there's just so much that's going to be tail doving off of what King Donald is trying to accomplish. We're not sure what he's trying to accomplish. You would tend to think that he's trying to do something good for the American population, but I'm not sure, what that is exactly, and what kind of a message is going to be conveyed in 6 months' time as a result of everything he's doing. So I agree with you. The little guy right now is going to struggle. And look, you're retired, Gary. I'm retired. At some point, things are going to come to a head where we can't enjoy life the way we want to. And I feel really bad for the middle class folk. I really do.
It's and not only that, but look at the hole that we're in financially at the moment, and as a country, and all of a sudden, if we have to start paying out these benefits again, like we did with with COVID,
Yeah.
how much deeper are we going to go in, and how many more generations are we committing to eventually pay for that bill? That
Well,
that
the last time it increased our deficit by what, 40%, 30%, when we were trying to address the COVID situation. We're not saying it was a bad move, but it still cost the country money. If we're going to do something on the same level, how much more are we going to go in terms of trying to help the businesses and the little guy throughout the country? The money's got to come from somewhere. Yeah, it's very tough to cut any particular area today. Where are you going to get that money from? And this is where I'm hoping that Team Canada, it's going to be a Team Canada effort. You have the premiers of every province and territory except for one right now. That's going to be giving the present leader of Canada, being Prime Minister Trudeau, and the future Prime Minister of Canada, guidance in terms of what's going to be good for their provinces and their people. They'll be able to get some kind of controls and commitments from the federal government of what they're going to be doing for each and every province, how they're going to be paying for it, how is Canada going to pay for it, how are the provinces going to pay for it, to be able to keep us afloat. I'd like to say for the next 4 years, but invariably, some of the stuff that Herr Trump is going to be doing right now might very well last us for generations. It could be 4, 8, 12 years in terms of the damages that this might do to the Canadian economy and to the world economy. So it's going to be a long run, Gary, for sure.
all we have to do is hope and pray that they've got most of the CRA cleaned out. Right? There was about 300 people.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that they found were working for the CRA during the pandemic and collecting the CERB benefit as well. Like,
Right, exactly.
so
It's
hopefully they've
it's
got
it's a
them
big
all
thing to
weeded
manage.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a large thing to manage, and you know what, Gary, it's going to be it's going to have to be done quick, just as quickly as with the COVID response. COVID was unexpected. We reacted to it the best we can. I think in terms of most countries and how a lot of countries reacted, we did pretty good. Not the best, but we did pretty good, better than most countries, especially far better than our southern neighbors. And I'm very hopeful that what they're going to be doing with Team Canada right now and trying to mitigate what Trump wants to do in the 1st of February and have an action plan in place. I like your idea. Hit them hard before actually the 1st of February comes around, and then deal with the consequences thereafter. Because you know what? If we don't do anything, there are going to be consequences anyway.
Yeah, we're looking, well, first of all, we have no real leadership at the moment. Um, he's looking at Trudeau. He's written Trudeau off altogether. So
Yeah.
is most of the party,
Hmm.
and so most Canadians. So it's like a ship without a rudder in a way.
Yeah.
You've got cabinet ministers who are working behind the scenes and trying to do the best they can. We have a parliament that is suspended.
Hmm.
Finally, Jagmeet Singh came out today and said, or yesterday, late yesterday, early today, said that he'd be willing to have a conversation with the Prime Minister about bringing Parliament back and at least getting whatever needs to be passed for the tariff war, to at least get that out of the way. But he said, I haven't been asked. And remember, the last 2 weeks I've said, where are they? Where are the opposition leaders? Why do we not
Yeah.
have a Team Canada in place here?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
and I don't know what Polyev would do or how he would respond to that. I'm sure it'd be a carbon tax something.
Hmm.
Um, but if he's really the prime minister in waiting and he wants to get off on the right foot, he should be jumping in the same as Singh did and said, look, let's sit down and talk. Let's get this worked out. What's in the best interest for the country, not the party and not your own political career at the moment. It's what's in the best interest of the country. And
Right.
this is a conversation that should have taken place 3 weeks ago.
Absolutely.
And all I say
Well,
is, now that I understand that, at least the approach has not been made by Trudeau. By the same token, though, what's wrong with Singh and what's wrong with Polyev making the approach on their own and doing it behind the scenes? You don't have to, make a big deal of it until the three of you are ready to come out and say, look, we've sat down, we've had a meaningful exchange of dialogue, and we're ready to move in what's the best direction for the country,
yeah. Yeah.
politics aside. And that has not happened. And I'm really I'm really disappointed and quite frankly pissed off with the lack of leadership that has been shown by all three major parties in this country.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? The fact that I didn't know about the Jasmeet Singh coming out of the woodwork. I mean, I was surprised. Jasmeet, who? We haven't heard from him in weeks. Now, great that he actually came out and offered to help and join Team Canada. Uh, but at the same time, he politicized the thing, basically saying, "Oh, look at me! I'm offering a friendly hand out there, and geez, nobody asked me anything." I mean, why politicize that? I mean, we're not talking about leadership races here. We're not talking about elections, which we know is coming up. We're talking about dealing with the threats that are coming from the United States as a country. There is no time for chest beating here, Gary. You're absolutely 1000% right. Now's not the time for chest beating. Now's the time to hold hands as a country, put our differences aside, and deal with this very, very serious situation. And I'm disappointed like you are. I'm just waiting to hear what Mr. Polyev is going to come up with. I mean, obviously, he's not going to be shown up by Mr. Singh, so give it 24 to 48 hours. He's going to come up with something, and I'm sure in our show next week, we're not going to be too pleased by what he's going to say, because that's what usually comes out of his mouth.
Yeah, the two-line slogans and what have you. Yeah, just anyhow. Again, as I've said in the past, he's the government. He's the prime minister in waiting. His party is the government in waiting. However, the polls. It's interesting since Trudeau's resignation, and between that and now getting into the trade wars. The Liberals have moved up a bit, and the cons have lost a little bit of ground at the expense of the Liberals. Now, there's still quite a wide margin, but that speaks volumes as to how Canadians felt about Trudeau, as did polls over the last year. And again, he should have had the wherewithal to just say, "Okay, I'm done." But he didn't. So anyway, that's interesting to watch, and they'll probably get, depending on how this leadership campaign goes, which really, they all put their papers in last week, and we'll get into that near the end of the show. But the fact of the matter is, it's been the great snore off so far. What's been happening now? Apparently the party must approve each candidate, and they've already said no to one, and then so that leaves 6 others. So maybe some of them are holding off on the heavy artillery until they get the official kiss of approval. I don't know. But anyway, it has been, for a shortened time frame, because they're picking their leader on March 9th. You know what? That's not that far away. February is a short month.
Yeah.
That's not that far away. And a couple of them, people, their names are maybe, recognized by, a number of Canadians, but not a whole lot, unless you're watching Question Period every day. So, they have a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. And, wow. But we'll get into that in a couple of minutes. And by the way, Chrystia Freeland, and we have a clip of her talking about this, is somebody who's out pushing as well to let's get the list of our taxes and tariffs in retaliation. Put it on the table right now. And I thought, man, why put it on the table? Let's just hit them. She has a reason, and it's in the clip, and I won't be a spoiler to that. But that's just the way it is. Now, it's almost 7:30, and one more Trump thing, and then we'll move on.
Okay.
But last week you made the comment about whether you would get home because of the GPS on the ship not being able to find the Gulf of America.
Right.
Well, guess what? Very shortly, if it hasn't been done already, at least in the U.S. for now, if you go to Google Maps, it's going to show up as the Gulf of America.
Yeah, I saw that on the news this morning.
Yeah. Now, is that not bending? And come on, the tech industry has been to Mar-a-Lago prior to Inauguration Day, and man, were they ever kissing the ring, big time.
Yeah.
And of course, Trump, whose understanding of technology doesn't go very far, I don't think, beyond his Truth Social platform. He's loving every second of it. He's loving every second of it. So
it kind of begs the first question that came to mind as I mean, there's a governing body managing URLs around the planet because we all live on the internet, right? I would
Yeah.
have thought there was some sort of a governing body that applications to change names of countries or flags or who knows what would have to go through some sort of a central body. I thought maybe managed by the United Nations or some organization like that. So what does that basically mean, Gary? A country can arbitrarily go and say, "Oh, we're going to call this that now," and that's the end of that. So I'm not really sure of what the process is here, but you know what? If Google's going to go ahead and for American citizens based on where they're from or Googling from, they're going to call it the Gulf of America. Um, are they even allowed doing that? I mean, let's go back 30 years before we actually had the internet the way it is right now. We had textbooks. I mean, we had encyclopedias. What 30 years back, renaming a country, we can just arbitrarily do it without going through a central body. Okay, fine. So Google for the United States is going to show Gulf of America, while the rest of the planet will continue calling it the Gulf of Mexico to the dismay of many American citizens. So I'm never going to call it the Gulf of America. I can tell you that for sure. Just like I would never call the United States of America anything else but the United States of America, or Germany, or Poland, or any country. That's a sovereign nation. International waters, the Gulf of Mexico, if I'm not mistaken, are international waters off a certain, I think it's 200 miles offshore. Well, how does Donald Trump have the right to just arbitrarily change the name of a body of water? I mean, since he made that announcement, I can't tell you how many memes are popping up all over the place from different people around the world ridiculing that decision. And you know what? Shame on Google for basically saying, "Sure, no problem. You want to rename anything else?" I just think it's an absolute shame that high tech and reputable organizations like Google would basically bow down to something like this. It's really weird, Gary. It's just I don't know. I don't get it, and I think it's just really ridiculous considering the more major critical problems that the United States faces. This was a priority one for King Trump. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, we'll let it go at that for now. I'm sure
Okay.
that's another issue that we will be revisiting, and probably sooner rather than later. But still related to the whole trade war prospects is a new Buy Canadian campaign, a move underway to encourage Canadians to buy local Canadian in a bid to help offset impacts of the trade war. BC Premier David Eby pitched the idea of vacationers in BC avoiding Hawaii and other U.S. destinations. And guess what? A Vancouver Island travel agent says an increasing number of clients are canceling planned trips to the U.S. in the wake of Trump's inauguration. And already, Deborah was telling me on TikTok, there's all kinds of TikTok influencers popping up now with different ways of, different things. If you bought this and it says Made in America, here is what we have found as a Canadian equivalent.
Hmm.
And do I have that? Like, there's even a web page now.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like, wow. Where am I? See if I can scroll through it. But it goes through and it shows you. It'll show you clothing and all of the various categories of things, and it shows if you're buying this, and it's an American brand or whatever. It shows what they have found so far that would be the Canadian equivalent. And actually, I just before the show started, I was just taking a quick look through it, and it's surprising, like some of the Canadian equivalents that they found for different things.
Yeah.
So it's starting, and a lot of the local business groups, the downtown business associations, are all starting now to focus on this as well, buy local. And it's, it's kind of the same as back in the days of the pandemic when, we were all huddled in our homes and couldn't go out.
Mm-hmm.
And then they a lot of the restaurants pivoted and started
Right.
offering takeout, ones that never did it before.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things you could do to help keep these businesses afloat. And then, different, there was the Business Improvement Association in St. John at the time. Eventually, they were delivering things. They set up a delivery service for their members so that people could buy online and then have it delivered from the store to them within a certain radius of the city, which was a rather unique idea, and it really seemed to help those struggling businesses in the downtown area, which were struggling not only from just losing customers, but they also through the week they lost all of the office crowd and school
Right.
crowd as well.
Right.
So it's a good. I think it's a good idea, and I think that this time around, let's keep it going once the dust settles from the trade war, and eventually it will, because it's going to hurt the U.S. to a large degree, and Trump's going to have to find a way to back out of it. But why not keep it going? Because we have, every day we're losing a business here or a business there, and these are smaller businesses. Somebody that opened it and they've poured their life into it,
Yeah.
and their savings and everything, trying to keep it afloat and keep a dream afloat. Providing a service to the public, and yeah. And the other thing that came up this week is, especially in Florida in particular, a lot of Canadians are selling their condos in their homes.
Selling their properties. Yep.
Yeah,
The market values in Florida for condominiums are dropping sharply. I was reading an editorial from a real estate broker in the Fort Lauderdale area, and by this time last year, a year over to this year, he's got three times the amount of listings that he did last year, and all of this started happening over the last month. So yeah, I mean, think about a lot of things that can really go down south for the United States. Southern Florida is, I mean, talking about snowbird haven for most Ontarians and a lot of Quebecers that go down to Fort Lauderdale, that go down to Hollandale, Hollywood. You have the British Columbians. They head out to down to California, and they head out to the Hawaiian Islands. Can you imagine the impact to the economy if even 30% of Canadians stop going there for whatever reason? Tremendous impact on the economy, because it's not just hotels, it's not just rentals, it's also the restaurant business, the entertainment business, the clothing business, everything down in the United States will invariably suffer. So I agree with you, Gary. This thing about Canadian citizens, and there's 40 million of us in total. I'd say about 60% of that 40 million have money in their pockets. Spend it domestically. Spend it in Canada. Keep the motion going. It'll help the local guy. Look, we banded together very positively during COVID. I think most Canadians were understanding, and they realize the importance of being able to control COVID in our country. Most of our premiers, Prime Minister Trudeau included, Prime Minister did a pretty good job in trying to keep everybody safe, whether it's family or friends. So Canadians hunkered down, and we got the job done. We came out of COVID, I'm not going to say unscathed, but we came out in relatively decent shape. I read an article this week, Gary, and sorry, I don't remember exactly what day it was, but in the Montreal Gazette, former Equality Party leader in Quebec, Robert Libman, has a wonderful weekly article, and he essentially said, "What better do we need in terms of critical things to jockey Canadians together hand in hand. So, you're looking at what Trump is doing on multiple levels. Okay, the tariffs will absolutely have devastating effects on us. That's one. The other one is this continuous disrespect to a sovereign nation like Canada to become its 51st state. You know what? Sometimes it doesn't take much to rally Canadians together. And the more and more I read in newspapers across the country, the more and more comments I'm seeing on social media, I'm starting to agree with you, Gary. I think Canadians are starting to band together thanks to Mr. Trump's rhetoric. And you know what? You don't want to get a bunch of angry Canadians together on one mission or on to do one thing specifically. And this whole thing about buy locally, if this thing takes on momentum, and when I say buy locally, including travel, not necessarily traveling to the United States, traveling within Canada or elsewhere in the world, I think Mr. Trump is going to be creating a big problem for his citizens, those that didn't vote for him, and especially those that voted for him. Yeah, so good on you, Mr. Libben, for noticing that. All we need is a good swat across the face to join us as Canadians on one common cause. So I like what you're showing here.
Well, hopefully we do get the message this time and stay with it. Even beyond the whole thing with the tariffs with the U.S., we also have a lot of stuff that we buy offshore, specifically China, and you've got the Sheins or the Temus, and a lot of people are buying through there. And yes, I understand that in some cases they're making brand name goods, and then turning around and copying it and just putting their own label on it, and it's half the price or even better. But that's not putting people here in Canada to work and helping them put food on the table and helping them with other day-to-day expenses, or helping family out, or the kids' education. So we really have to, I think, to start focusing. But we also have to, and we went through this with the pandemic, and we're about to go through it again. We're fragile because our damn supply chain is basically offshore.
Right. Absolutely.
And until we have some politicians listening to some economists and other specialists in the world of business, and until as Canadians we're committed to saying, okay, you know what, yeah, I'm going to pay a little extra, a little more, because it's more expensive for companies to operate in Canada because of the taxes and everything. But what are you getting from that? Well, you're getting some kind of form of health care that you don't pay for, good or bad. But you're getting a lot of other benefits at that higher tax level, and you've got people in your own country working. And those people have pride in what they're doing in turning out goods for fellow Canadians.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a certain level of pride that builds there. And by the way, that's really disrespectful. I'm not sure what he's talking about. Oh, here we go. I wish we could find ways to replace online buying, like bypassing Amazon, Walmart, and so on. You know what?
Yeah, we're feeling it here. We're feeling it here in Quebec.
Are we ever?
Amazon is shutting down seven warehouses, just clearing house completely. I can't remember what the count of employees was, Gary, but this again
about
is
1,800.
1,800 people gone, poof, just like that. I believe this individual is absolutely right. I think we become such an animal in terms of online shopping, online buying, and we don't really go to the local retailers or local markets to buy anything these days because of absolute convenience that the online buying offers people. Amazon and Walmart, they especially Amazon during COVID. I mean, everything was coming through them. Somehow they managed to get the product to your home, maybe a little late, but they got the product there. In most cases, a lot of this product isn't anywhere close to being Canadian. Most of it is coming from overseas. So there again, to your comment about our dependency for overseas products comes into big place, especially when you're looking at organizations like Amazon, who a lot of individuals sell on Amazon who essentially buy product from organizations in China, which fills those guys' pockets up, like organizations like Alibaba, for example. It's just back to back to back where we as a country just continuously depend on buying our components, buying our products from someplace overseas. And that's usually through an agent such as Amazon, and even Walmart has a pretty good e-commerce profile. So the more full blue, I think your comment is absolutely bang on. What can we do as a country to not be imposed upon with companies like Amazon? Gary, it comes down to what our politicians are willing to do in terms of managing multi-billionaires like the people in Amazon, Jeff Bezos. I don't know what they can do with that. Tariffs, our own sort of tariffs on that. I don't know.
Well, it's apparently the Canadian government has 5 or 6 contracts that are worth about 10 million each, I think, something like that. I thought they said with Amazon, and I'm presuming that's AWS, the Amazon Web Services.
Web Services, yeah.
Yeah. So that just after that was, and I think it was Champagne, the minister, who brought that up. And just after he was quoted in the video of his comments hit the airwaves, Amazon said, well, we'd be willing to discuss this. So, maybe the federal government does have some leverage. I don't think the Quebec government has any leverage at all with Amazon at this stage. But this, you just said squirrel, and I'm going because there's more to it than what Amazon says as far as reorganization. And yes, you know what? There are some pretty solid labor laws in Quebec. And yes, there's one warehouse in Laval that's unionized, and there was another one preparing to unionize, and that's something Amazon doesn't like. But and that it's basically focused on that. And I'm wondering too if some of the paperwork that's involved as a corporation doing business in Quebec. And there's 2 or 3 different layers of paperwork that would be involved, if you catch my drift. Right. Including, you might as well just say it in, the whole language legislation and approach and everything. I'm wondering if that has something to do with it, and Amazon just didn't want to open that can of worms. Because, they've only had a presence like this with 7 warehouses and distribution centers since 2020. That's like only 5 years.
Yeah. Think about that, Gary. How many millions of dollars they spend in establishing 7 points of presence in the province of Quebec, along with all the transport and the movement of the materials out of the warehouses and the returns into the warehouse. How many multi-millions of dollars did Amazon spend? So think about that.
Yep. And in Quebec is... Sorry,
they work on a business model, obviously, right? So what could have been so bad in terms of their financial projections about keeping the Quebec operations intact that would justify just throwing those millions and millions and millions of dollars down the drain? There had to have been something financially that was going to be getting in the way of their bottom line in Quebec. My personal opinion, it had everything to do with unionization, because they're used to, in the United States, they're used to paying rock bottom minimum wage salaries, no matter what you're doing in the warehouse. So you're looking at what is it now, 7.29, 7.30 in the United States minimum wage.
Yeah.
Can you imagine these organizations unionized down there? And you know how unions work. One starts up and it spreads like cancer. So what do they need to do? Cut the cancer. And I think that's exactly what Mr. Bezos did in Quebec, to send a message to other warehouses across the country and Canada, maybe even sending a message down to the American operations. But
Oh, sure.
wow,
Yeah.
just throwing those millions of dollars away, it's like unbelievable.
Because it makes sense for them to have a presence like in the greater Montreal area, to serve Quebec, which
What
is
about
a
your neck of
large,
the woods? What about
a
your neck of
large
the
market. And I was going to say Atlantic Canada. Definitely, because this one, the next thing I'm going to mention, kind of slipped under the radar. Didn't seem to get much attention, probably because it wasn't opened yet. But last year at this time, Walmart, which was just a couple of weeks away from opening a huge distribution center here outside of Montreal, walked away. Said, oh, we're changing, we're reorganizing and changing the way we're doing things. And that distribution center was for the Walmart online, and it was going to serve Quebec and probably, a couple of parts of Eastern Ontario, but it was designed to serve Quebec and Atlantic Canada going into the future. And they walked away this huge distribution center. And I don't know if Walmart built it themselves, or they entered into a deal with a developer and the developer built it and they were going to lease it back. I don't know what the story was, but I just heard about it once. I saw, I think it was in the Gazette, or it might have been on CTV News on their website. But it just popped up the once, and they. But you have to wonder, why did all of a sudden they walk away? And they didn't even open it. I don't even think they had stock in there yet. They were just getting ready to start stocking it. But why did they walk away? What changed in the probably 18 months to 2 years from the time they decided to get the shovels in the ground and build that facility to,
who knows? It might have had something to do with the Quebec government. I mean, look, the Quebec government is spending so much money to try to attract businesses to break ground in and around Quebec, and that's a very, with all the political turmoil here with the language and whatever, it's a very tough thing to do. So the government ends up throwing money at organizations for breaking ground, like Norvolt, for example. Right, Gary, is a typical example. It could be that the deal fell through with the Quebec government, that Walmart all of a sudden were not getting the funding that they were potentially negotiating for, and they just said, well, thanks, but no thanks. It doesn't make any business sense for us, and they'll probably move it somewhere else. But not an easy thing. I would speculate it has something to do with some sort of negotiation breaking down with the Quebec government.
Right. Okay. So now that we've gone down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Let's get back on track with the potential coronation of a front runner in the Liberal leadership race, because we have 7 candidates who filed papers by last Thursday's deadline, and they were required to submit letters or documentation from 300 registered Liberals and a $50,000 deposit against the $350,000 entry fee. The party is now reviewing each application before final approval of the candidate. Already, though, one Liberal MP, Chandra Arya, has been disqualified. Can you believe that?
Was there any? I heard of it, but I didn't see any details anywhere. Did they? Was there a reason given as to why he was disqualified? Some of his prerequisites weren't met, or what?
Well, we'll get into that in a second. Here is a little bit of video from his website that he had set up.
Canada deserves leadership that isn't afraid to make big decisions. Decisions that rebuild our economy, restore hope, create equal opportunities for all Canadians, and secure prosperity for our children and grandchildren. bold political decisions are not optional, they are necessary. I'm stepping forward to take on this responsibility and lead Canada as its next Prime Minister.
So, that was on his website as he was launching his leadership bid. And you may recall he's the one who made no bones about the fact he doesn't speak French. And he said it doesn't really matter. And he said it doesn't matter to the people in Quebec. So there was that aspect of it. He's also had some ventures in other areas, including off to India and a meeting with the Prime Minister, not as an official representative of government. And he tried to explain his decision to do that, tried to explain that away at a time when relations with India and Canada are not great for a number of reasons, including the alleged Indian operatives on Canadian soil and the hit squads. So there were a number of things I think that kind of led to that. The party said that he just didn't really meet what they were looking for in a candidate. So he issued, or if I can find it here, yeah, he issued a statement on X before the party even responded to the fact. And there's just one paragraph in particular, and I'm going to have to do this for anyone who may be just listening. Today I was informed by the Liberal Party of Canada that I will not be permitted to enter the leadership race. While I await their official communication, I am carefully considering my next steps. This decision raises significant questions about the legitimacy of the leadership race and, by extension, the legitimacy of the next Prime Minister of Canada. I remain steadfast in my commitment to working hard for the benefit of all Canadians. With a focused approach, I will continue striving to ensure a secure and prosperous future for the generations to come. Not closing the door on anything. Not closing the door on anything, but you have to wonder, okay, what is to come? Is once he gets the official letter in hand, is he going to perhaps launch some legal action or what? But I don't think we've seen the last of him as far as anything related to the Liberal leadership race. I just don't. It's really, really quite interesting how quickly they bounce that one out. So, let's have a look too at the 6. Where did I put the 6? Here we go. So we have Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gould. They're considered the 3 front runners. Jaime Batiste, Nova Scotia MP. Frank Baylis, former Quebec MP and businessman. And Ruby Dalla, a former MP who had some issues over her treatment of her Parliament Hill staff, and some nannies she hired to look after her elderly mother. Now she says all of that was resolved, but these are things that kind of hang out there, I guess, when you're getting into this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And as far as the 3 front runners are concerned, as I said, former government House Leader Karina Gould, she laid out her plan just after filing her papers the other day. She laid out her plan for bringing the party back together and getting back to the grassroots of.
I want to make sure that the Liberal Party of Canada works for its membership. I've heard from too many people across this country that the Liberal Party of Canada hasn't given members the space that they need. And so I'm here today to propose 3 things to make the Liberal Party of Canada about the members and give power back to our membership. First and foremost, we need to get together more, and I'm going to bring back policy conventions. We've been talking at you for too long. It's time for the Liberal Party of Canada to listen to our members once again. I remember attending regional meetings and national conventions where we had great debates on the convention floor. We need to get back to that because the people across this country who join our party do so because they have things to say and they have ideas to share. And so I want to hear from you. I want us to be that big red machine, not just in terms of knocking on doors, which of course is incredibly important, but in terms of the ideas that you are bringing forward to make our country the amazing place that it is. And as leader, I would be committed to meeting on an annual basis with all EDA presidents across the country. I also think it's time for us to decentralize the party. Ottawa doesn't know best. We need to empower our regions, our provinces, our people on the ground who are the eyes and ears that hear from our communities. One of the reasons why I think we lost touch over the past couple of years is because we weren't listening to our membership. You were talking to your neighbors, you were hearing from people across the country, and you were telling us what we needed to focus on. And we got too focused on being government in Ottawa and not enough on what was happening on the grounds in our communities. I want to make sure that we have more field organizers in every region across the country, and not just on the ground, but digitally as well. We had an excellent in 2018, but it's 2025 now. And we need to adapt to the current situation and make sure that we can campaign in 2025 and for years to come. And finally, I would make sure that we are empowering young Liberals in this country and bring back the National Youth Director position. Young Liberals have always been a force in our party, and we need to make sure that you have the respect and the space to be that force once again.
So she describes her campaign as grassroots, with a lot of small donations coming in from all across the country. She said, "I don't have a lot of money, and but I'm really quite impressed with the people who are reaching out. And, it's small donations, but it's all adding up." And I think she hit the nail on the head with the 3 key things that party really needs to do. Once again, haven't really heard anything else from a policy perspective, but we haven't really heard anything as far as a policy perspective from the other 2 who are considered front runners as well. But she did come out, and I thought that that was really interesting to hear her address the issue with the party and the line that, they get lost in the Ottawa bubble.
Right.
Ottawa knows best.
Gary, I'm just going to briefly relate to something you said last week and basically support that. This young lady is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Maybe not this election, but the next election. I mean, she is just something else in terms of speaking eloquently, speaking directly to what the issues are, and being absolutely upfront and honest. She's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Maybe she's gonna cause some ripples during this particular campaign for a Liberal leader, but I can see her leading this country in quick time. If she keeps up the good work she's doing right now and just staying the course of being honest with Canadian citizens. She's really impressive.
And what you didn't see was she is fluently bilingual. She switches back and forth so seamlessly, and her French just rolls along the same as her English. Like, it's
That is so important for a
Yeah,
victory.
it is.
You have to court Quebec. I mean, the candidate, the fellow that just basically got thrown out, the seventh candidate. I mean, for him to say French is not that important. Right? It's not important for him to know French and lead a bilingual country, English and French Canadians. That is basically political suicide. I don't know what he was trying to accomplish by making a rude comment like that. I mean, even as an Anglophone Quebecer, I find that very disrespectful in terms of what he said. So, but in her not in her defense, but patting her on the back, good for her. She knows what's important in this province, and you know what? Any sort of electoral victory or electoral majority in a federal election depends on the Quebec vote, no matter which way you slice it.
Yep, it does. The seats.
And the New Brunswick vote.
10 seats. Well, usually it seems to set the tone as to what way the election is going to go. It has a couple of times in some of the federal elections I've covered. But I'll say one thing, like Gould is not, when she does switch to French, she's not doing like 3 or 4 words or 1 or 2 lines. She would have switched from her English on that and the whole thing in French.
Yeah.
Not just, paying it lip service. So, yeah, she really handles herself well on camera. She, there's no ahs, blahs, or anything else. Like she's outside in a snowstorm on the street. So anyway, hopeful Chrystia Freeland, former Deputy Prime Minister and also our former Finance Minister, has been making the rounds, doing some media interviews and that. And earlier this week in an interview with Bloomberg, she says she would release our counter-tariff hit list now.
Well, I think we should start responding today. I think that we should publish for consultation a retaliation list. I think it should be massive, right? It should be 200 billion. That's not saying that we retaliate at 200 billion, but giving us like a menu, like a smorgasbord of choices. And we need to publish it now because when President Trump says America first, I believe him. And I believe that he doesn't care that much if Canadian politicians are jumping around, banging our fists on the table, etc. But he cares about Americans. And I want Wisconsin dairy farmers to see themselves on that list and to be calling the White House and to be saying, Mr. President, we elected you, but now it's going to be terrible. We're not going to be able to sell stuff to Canada. I want Michigan blue-collar workers who make washing machines in Michigan to see their washing machines on the list and to call up the White House and say, Mr. President, what the heck here? We love selling stuff to Canada. Do not do this. And the thing that I think can sometimes be missed, especially in how Americans think about this, is I just don't think you think of us as major players. And that is fine with us. But what you miss in that calculation about Canada is uniquely in the whole world, we have economic leverage over you. You guys are not a big trading nation, but insofar as you export stuff, you sell it to your Canadian pals.
Your Canadian pals. Now, Freeland is considered, as I said earlier, to be a challenger to Mark Carney, who is the perceived front runner, who has been very low-key with media avails, but apparently working the reception circuit as well as the phones. Yeah. There hasn't been much, I've not seen a whole lot from Carney in the past week. But I do know that there have been, a meet the candidate kind of get together at a number of places across the country. But again, it's like I said earlier, Eddie, that this is a very short campaign. And
Yeah.
and Freeland the other day suggested that Carney is the heir apparent and is the favorite of the inner upper workings of the Liberal Party. And sometimes I wonder, like, is he really listening to that? Is that being floated, and is he listening and is kind of thinking, well, this is going to be a cakewalk. I don't really have to. Yeah, I really don't have to do a whole lot. I'll just save it all for once I'm in. Because remember, for the first time in our history, we're going to have an unelected prime minister if he wins.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, I think that's, if you are right in terms of what you're saying, he figures he's a shoo-in. I think that's kind of dangerous because, Gary, you and I both know that the moment the House opens again and there is a Liberal leader, there is going to be a vote of non-confidence and we're all going to be going to election. The time should be now for him to start putting policy in place, not just to the voting members of the Liberal Party of Canada. Anything he does say to them has to be conveyed to the general population because he's not going to have very much time to campaign either. So why not take the opportunity and do that now? Listening to that clip that you showed of Chrystia Freeland, I think that she did a little bit of that, as a matter of fact, basically stating the policy she'd like to see taken immediately with the American government. Canadians are listening. I was listening, right? Better to do that than say nothing at all. So I don't think Mr. Carney is doing himself a very good favor by just keeping quiet on things,
Yeah, and when I get where she was coming from with, okay, let's put the list on the table and get it out there and get the pressure coming from all parts of the country on the White House once they realize what it means. I get that. At the same time, I still would say, yeah, let's do that and plant the seeds of discontent. And within 2 or 3 days, as that's really starting to roll and come to a head, then today's the day we're slapping our counter tariffs on. Now, never mind, they're not even going to be counter. We're just slapping tariffs on and taxes, and there's going to be a 10% or tax on all energy flowing south, much to the dismay of Danielle Smith. But we can't pussyfoot around. Like, it's just been so disheartening in a lot of ways to see the lack of leadership and at the hands of our prime minister for the next couple of weeks, but also how we're trying to be very diplomatic and very polite about it, and you know what, you're fighting with a guy that is used to getting down and getting dirty.
Yeah.
And there's only one way, because we're going to right now bow down 3 or 4 times over the next week. And yes, we're committed to this. And yes, we're committed to that. And yes, we're doing this and we're moving in this direction. And then what's it going to be in 6 months' time? There's going to be another something.
Right.
And because we've already set the precedent, we're going to roll over and play dead again.
Yeah, it's, you know what? The going joke is Canadians will apologize for everything before anything bad happens. We have to stop apologizing. That's not our culture. I mean, Canada has been in the forefront for its entire history, whether it's important, whether it's major, whether it's taking up arms, whatever the case is. Canada has always been up there. And when the chips are down, we typically don't apologize. And I think you're right, Gary. Right now is not the time to apologize to anything from the United States of America. We have to be doers, beg for forgiveness later. We'll
Yep.
deal with it later. But just sitting there and taking one or two sucker punches and then a gut punch and then say, "Oh, you know what? I know you didn't mean that, Mr. Trump. Why don't you hit me again?" Out of the window. We cannot take that approach. And you know what? You're right. I think Mr. Trudeau has kind of put us in a position like that because of the fact he didn't leave when he should have. There was a whole show on that a couple of weeks ago. But I think we as Canadians, our leaders, the premiers, the Prime Minister of Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada to be, have to start swinging now. You're absolutely right, Gary.
Well, Saturday is just around the corner. It's going to be interesting to see what happens tomorrow and Friday, and then what we wake up to on Saturday, February the 1st. And guess what? That's another week in the political history books. Remember,
Yeah.
if you're watching the recorded version, please leave a comment below. And please share, like, and subscribe to our channel. We appreciate your support in helping us grow our YouTube presence. So, from Montreal, I'm Gary MacDonald.
And from Tulu, Mexico, this is Eddie Tkalik wishing you good night.
Night Talk returns in 7 days. Good night.